The efficiency of private firms is often praised. Private firms are regarded as incredibly efficient, competent, and productive, in contrast with the useless, incompetent government. Hardened by a competitive environment, private firms are said to perform incredibly well. This is what we are told, this is what we believe. Private firms, the free market, the efficiency of these things is utterly idolized. Why do we take this for granted? Why do we assume that this is the case? Anyone who has worked a range of jobs is perfectly aware that many workplaces are plagued with incompetence and inefficiency. Not because of the workers, but because of stupid practices, bad management, and nonsensical commands. Many businesses are plagued with inefficiency and incompetence. That is the reality. We can all see it, but still the myth of these totally efficient private entities somehow lives on. Of course, it is a convenient myth for the interests of the wealthy. Why do we always assume that bad firms will fail? They survive and prosper all the time. Many businesses are near dysfunctional and nowhere near as efficient as they could be. And some say, but these businesses will die. Except they very often don't. Some of them are too big to fail, some of them are monopolies, so consumers have no choice. And it should not be forgotten that a private company does not need to be perfect. It just needs to be better than, or as good as, the competition. If the competition is inefficient and incompetent, that does not mean much. It is also the case that free market fanatics assume consumers are perfectly rational machines. Of course, this is utter nonsense. There are plenty of people who will buy from incompetent and inefficient companies. There are plenty of people who make bad consumer choices. The market is not magic. It has its advantages, but it also has serious flaws. The assumption that consumers are perfectly rational is a classic free market mistake. Consumers are anything but, which creates serious issues for free market advocates and their many assumptions. Some point out that unlike the government, businesses can fail. Businesses can fail more easily than governments. It is true. But governments can also fail quite easily. Leaders can be voted out. Leaders can be overthrown and killed. The skilled and educated can often migrate. So incentives are still in place. Sometimes even more is on the line. The efficient, competent private firm contrasted with the inefficient, incompetent state. Why do we mindlessly accept this assumption? Why do we mindlessly accept this narrative? It has some truth to it, but it is hardly obvious or absolute, and it is constantly overstated. It is nowhere near as true as some of its advocates pretend. The government is viewed as inefficient and incompetent, and often this is true. But keep in mind that the government is subject to infinitely more scrutiny than the average private company. How much inefficiency and incompetence could you find in the average private company if you subjected it to 1% of the attention the government receives? My guess would be a lot. Because to some extent, inefficiency and incompetence characterize most human organizations. So part of the perception of efficient company versus inefficient government is simply a matter of the amount of scrutiny each organization receives. The government receives 1,000 times more scrutiny, so it looks 1,000 times worse. And so the myth develops. But it should also be noted that there is at least some truth to most myths. The competitive environment of the market does encourage competence and efficiency to a point. Private companies can fail more easily than governments usually can. And in some ways they have performed better. So there is some truth to this idea. but I think the truth of it is heavily overstated. Perhaps private firms are more efficient than the government, but they are not the super efficient, highly competent organisations that they are often portrayed as. Likewise, the government has achieved some great things. Just look at the history of humanity's activities in space. NASA, the Soviet government. These revolutionary scientific and technological efforts were led by governments. The idea that government is incapable of competence and efficiency is clearly not true. There are endless examples that demonstrate the contrary. Governments have achieved some quite incredible things, scientifically, industrially, and technologically. Personally, I am a market socialist. I do believe in markets. Markets do have advantages. At the very least, they are tried and tested. They have been proven to work more efficiently than command economies in the past. I do not believe in command economies. I think such structures have been proven to be dysfunctional and dangerous. But I am not a free market fanatic. The government has a limited role to play in the economy. And as technology evolves, the potential for economic planning lives on. Perhaps artificial intelligence and modern technology can make yesterday's failed fantasies tomorrow's realities. We shall see. No idea should be dismissed forever. New things become possible every day. Every potential future should be considered.